What's something rich people do that the average person has no idea about? Story 1, there are restaurants and social clubs hidden in plain sight that the general public has no idea even exist. They don't even advertise themselves. The only way you'd know is if someone with money brought you there, as I was. Story 2, when their kids go to college, very rich people will buy them a condo rather than put them in a dorm. This is especially true in high-population university-dense locations like Boston or NYC. Then at graduation, they'll sell the condo, and the profit from the 4 years of appreciation will pay for a good portion of tuition. Story 3, I have read that rich people talk to each other about money in a way that middle-class people would not do. The rich educate each other about how to get better money management, tax benefits, etc. Many people in the middle class were raised to believe such discussions are irredeemably tacky. Story 4, doctors on call. I have several clients worth between 20 to 50 million, and all of them pay a premium price for a doctor on call. Literally any time of the day. 330 in the morning, your foot hurts. Doc answers. Midday, you need a script ASAP. Doc fills it. Need an appointment first thing in the morning, last minute. Doc makes room. The level of health care given to those who have unlimited money is truly one of the most amazing and sickening things I've seen. People seem to assume I think this service is only available to insanely wealthy people. It's not. It's just a common theme among the very wealthy I deal with on the day-to-day. I've seen several replies saying we are only worth a couple million, 100,000, and we do it. Not as unreachable as you think. This is out of reach for most average American families, considering the median income is 40K more or less. Story 5, with the exception of maybe a couple celebrity rich people, almost none of them think of themselves as rich. They all hold someone else who is even richer than them up as an example of someone who is actually rich. Story 6, I made friends with a guy who was the captain of one of the yachts of a Russian oligarch. He told me about how they have support yachts for the main yachts. The support yachts sail ahead to a destination, set up the island, clean up locations after the main client has left, resupply the main yacht, bring tenders like extra jet skis to location, etc. I knew people had yachts. I did not know people had yachts for their yachts. Story 7, I knew a family that went on trips to exotic locations several times a year. They all traveled first class on different planes. In case something happened, it wouldn't greatly impact their business holdings. Story 8, weekly deliveries of fresh flowers. Those large floral displays that 5-star hotels have in their lobbies. Rich people have similar displays in the foyer to their homes, with new displays delivered every week or so, plus flowers for the rest of the house. Can easily cost $2,000 a week, plus additional deliveries for winter and summer homes. Story 9, with the exception of celebrities, they don't use social media and maintain a strict sense of privacy. Rich people don't use Facebook. You don't have to be rich to do that, but so many people don't understand the value of privacy. There's an old saying that bears repeating, there's only one thing better than being rich and famous. Being rich. Story 10, my son's friend's grandfather was very wealthy. His friend said he would often just say, let's go to Hawaii or wherever, and they'd all hop on his private jet. And off they go for a few days. This guy was an incredible person. He donated heavily to really good causes. When he died, his home estate was just sitting empty. His cleaning lady was given a house on the grounds in perpetuity to live in. She kept up the huge house. There's also a groundskeeper who maintained the landscape. There are just under 200 acres in a wealthy area on a river. A trust had been set up that could fund this place for over 100 years. My son's friend asked if he could live there. So now he lives in this crazy, huge old house. It had been the grandfather's childhood home, which he had disassembled and moved to a new location. It is an incredible place. The grandfather had no college education, but he came from a wealthy, well-connected family. His father had been the U.S. ambassador to Ireland, Poland, and Belgium under FDR. He and his buddy invented the first central electrocardiographic system. They made millions from this and many other valuable medical technologies. Story 11, outsource everything. Hire someone who specializes in XYZ to do it. Never a jack of all trades. Rich people aren't good with money. They hire people who are good with money to manage theirs. They aren't inherently tidier people. They hire a cleaning service. They would never file their own taxes. They use accountants. They don't do their own shopping or styling. They hire personal shoppers and stylists. They don't pick and purchase their own furniture or decor. They hire designers. They don't even manage their schedules. They have assistants, need branding, marketing, legal help, strategy, hire specialists. Time is the most valuable asset, and outsourcing lets you buy more of it. Story 12, all those sneaky special perks at Walt Disney World. Hidden doors lead to secret hallways away from the public, hidden rooms, and special amenities for them, so they never have to wait for anything. Story 13, I worked at a place where the CEO wouldn't show up sometimes to the office. So we just chatted with his bodyguard because he had nothing to do. So, yeah, bodyguard at the office in case he wants to show up. Whenever the CEO showed up, he had security everywhere. Which is strange because I've seen other CEOs founders around in Silicon Valley, and they didn't have much of a security presence. Only after working at the company and realizing how disgusting, toxic, and despicable that place was, I finally understood why he needed security. Story 14, I work on super yachts. I can't name any because of NDAs. This is what happens when the boss wants to go for lunch at their friend's villa. Helicopter picks them up from their mansion, lands on the helideck. The yacht goes a couple hundred yards offshore from the coastal villa. Helicopter goes from helideck to the villa and drops the boss off, then goes to pick up after dinner, and everything happens in reverse to return the boss back to the mansion. This easily costs about $120K in fuel, crew expenditures, and all the rest for lunch, which is nothing to them when a boat like this costs about $15 million a year to maintain, all for personal pleasure and a place to hide. You don't know what money is until you've seen all this stuff firsthand. Story 15, not me, but a friend of a friend worked for a crazy rich family, and the wife had a surrogate for all of her kids. They were genetically hers and her husband's, but she wasn't interested in carrying them. Even more wild, she hired 2 surrogates at the same time, so they could have twiblings, meaning that each surrogate would carry a child, so that they would be born around the same time. Apparently, the surrogates had to sync their cycles and everything so that the timing would work out right. Of course, they were well taken care of, and everything was paid for, but man, twiblings, who would have thunk? Story 16, I know a rich person who has a director of continuity. Their job is to make sure that every one of the family's homes has the same streaming services, magazine, newspaper subscriptions, food in the fridge, clothes in their closets. Like if they bought a hoodie that dude really likes, try to have one in each house, so he doesn't have to worry about transporting it. They also coordinate things like if they take the PJ to a far-off destination, where the plane's linen's getting laundered, and where are they picking up food for the return trip. Story 17, really rich, gated private communities. Many that are out in lesser thought about states like Montana. There are a lot of higher up, wealthier government and agencies of folks who retire in that part of the country. It gets insane, and for some the exclusivity gets to levels of needing other rich people to vouch for you to get in before you can even buy a crazy expensive home. Some of those places are more like a gated entire town versus a community suburb. This winter fancy house picture has made the rounds on Reddit before, and it's an example of someone I'm talking about. The address of that house is 6 Aurora Borealis Way, Big Sky, Montana, 59720. I had to do some hardcore internet sleuthing to uncover the address through some random PDF doc I found online, LOL, which is in a private community called the Yellowstone Club. And these are just the winter vacation homes communities, which are usually the smaller homes of uber-rich folks. So all that to say, there are levels to this. Also, the mansions in New England are the craziest ones in the country to me, more so than La Orenigrexie. There are some hyper-wealthy, OLDED money mansions in that part of the country. Story 18. This may seem small and silly, but it stuck with me. Someone who was a personal assistant to an ultra-wealthy person described how part of their duties was stocking their boss's personal bathroom, and their boss used a new full-size bar of soap for washing their hands, and then that full-size only used once bar would be discarded. So I'm going to say that they're grotesquely wasteful on levels that us peons really cannot fathom. Story 19, a lot of them pay for companionship. Not on a level, but they'll pay people to pretend to be friends with them. I've actually known a couple of people who have been involved in stuff like that. Taking money to be a short-term companion, going out to a meal or a movie or something completely mundane. I guess when you're ultra-wealthy, the sort of friends you keep company with aren't the sort who do things like go to the movies together. Story 20, I grew up poor, am now lower upper class, 600K household income, and know a bunch of decamillionaires top 5 MBA. Work in finance, what I think would surprise people is how U-shaped a lot of things are. By that I mean the lower class and upper class act more similar than the middle class. The upper and lower class are very uncensored and will give their true, often offensive opinions about race, politics, etc., both in private and on social media. The middle and upper middle class especially are very censored because they are worried about their career and social status, in a way the poor and rich aren't. The rich, of course, have better grammar spelling arguments. Story 21, I did security through a third party for a group of wealthy individuals that drive Alfa Romeos that were raced and signed by Enzo Ferrari. That's it. Only these ancient race cars. They pick a gorgeous area to drive them in and then have them shipped in from all over the world. At this time, it was in the Glacier Water National Parks with the vehicles and most owners staying in the Prince of Wales Hotel. I want to clarify, I wasn't the security for the rich people. I was there to guard their vehicles. Bunch of rich old guys with women who looked like their daughters. I really pissed one of them off by asking if it was some kind of dad-daughter event. Anyways, they had personal specialist mechanics following around and working on these vehicles. It was a whole thing. They would fly them from country to country and keep them in storage when they weren't in use. Story 22, they pretend to be normal. They don't wear their brands on their clothes. They don't brag about their fortune. They find it easier to go through life this way, pretending to be the average person when they secretly are very wealthy. Story 23, replacing sheets constantly. I met someone a few years ago with old money wealth, and hearing some of the things her family had a budget for that was bigger than my family's income was insane. One of these things was a $70,000 per year on bedding because they replaced it after use. They genuinely thought that using sheets for longer than a week was disgusting, and washing them wasn't an option. I asked them if they re-wore clothes or not, and saw the cogs turn in their head, as if it almost made them realize how silly it was to think sheets were gross after a week, but clothes were perfectly washable. They don't even donate them or anything, which makes it even more insane and wasteful. And these are people who have several staff that would have washed the sheets daily if asked to. Story 24, good friend is very wealthy. .com money. Anonymously gives his money to local nonprofits NPOs. Some he volunteers at, specifically avoids national NPOs so he can see the local impact. Drives a 10-year-old Honda. Lives in small, old home in Seattle that is impeccably furnished, maintained. I would kill to have his life. P. Story 25, their kitchen is for display only. They still cook on their own, but they do so in a separate kitchen tucked away from view. The display kitchen typically has high-end appliances like a Miele-branded oven range and whatnot, but it will never be used. The countertops are made from some imported material that no one is allowed to place items on. They also have separate cars for separate duties. I recall one family friend bought an Audi Q7, and its sole purpose was to drop their kids off at school, and it was the lower-end vehicle of their fleet. They had one separate vehicle to commute to work in and a separate one for grocery shopping. Story 26, I had a job right after college as a gopher for a construction company. Some of their projects were in a very rich neighborhood. It was grotesque seeing rooms full of clearly unused stuff. Example, one rich family had a literal home theater, as in like a 50-scale actual movie theater, in a room full of unopened still and cellophane DVDs. This was the early 2000s. Story 27, Lombard loans. The TLDR is that you borrow money against your assets because the cost of being out of the market is greater than the cost of selling everything down to cash. If you borrow 15M against your 35M portfolio, and the portfolio goes up by 5, you make 175M if you borrow at 4. That loan costs you 0. 6M and only congrats. You're now 150K better off plus whatever you needed the money for if you sell 15M of assets. Your 20M portfolio goes up 5. You make 1M. Now you get to grind it back up to 35. Remember, timing the market. Story 28, they have personal bankers that literally handle every expense that their household incurs. I once knew a lady who was in the middle of a divorce. The estate was about $9 million. After the divorce, she was telling me that her portion of the money seemed to be going away really quickly, and asked for ways that I thought she could economize. I had previously noted that they had Comcast Fiber and ATT DSL going into their house, and asked her why she had both services and how much it cost her per month. She said she had no idea. I asked her how could she have no idea. She said the bank took care of all that. It turns out there was a single person at the bank who took care of every monthly bill. That person gave her a quarterly statement with a single figure on it. It's hard to believe, but I think a lot of people probably live like this, not me. Story 29, my parents have my great-grandparents' silver bell for calling the service from their dining room. My grandpa had a Matisse just sitting in storage somewhere. Story 30, my wife just told me that as a kid, her grandparents would take her family to St. Thomas each year, and one of the days they would take their boat to St. John for China shopping. She didn't realize that was a rich kid thing until she was in her 30s. Story 31, I think as far as financial planning, in real estate anyway, there are ridiculous tax breaks the average person doesn't know about. 1031 exchange isn't any secret. A lot of you guys are probably aware of it, but I bet maybe 3 of folks reading this have used it. 1031 is where you sell real estate for a profit, and as long as you follow IRS 1031 guidelines, mainly reinvesting profit into another piece of real estate, you pay 0 taxes on that particular sale. Then there is something called cost segregation study, another insane tax loop some rich lobbyist and congressman must have come up with years ago. Basically, if you own a commercial real estate building and you submit a CSS, you can bonus depreciate, depending on the size worth of your asset, hundreds of thousands of dollars over a short period, 1 to 7 years usually. That's huge because normal depreciation schedule on commercial RE is like 37 years. I've seen buildings even lower value range of 2 million. You achieve 6 figures per year for 5 years in direct deduction against income. Not sure if investing, tax advantage examples was OP intentions, so apologies if not spicy. Story 32, I worked at a private aviation firm in college. It was the home base of Victoria's Secret Express owner Les Wexner. He had a Boeing business jet and 2 Global Express. One day, he was arriving back from a trip to Israel. His pearl black Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting on the tarmac. As it pulled slightly closer to the plane, it managed to hit something on the apron and blow a tire. About 45 seconds later, an identical pearl black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulls around the corner. Apparently, when you're worth over $6 billion, having a backup $450K car, just in case, is a real thing. Story 33, I worked for a very rich guy once. He was odd and kind of nerdy. He dropped in many conversations of how he had hiked the Grand Canyon, as if it were some sort of great accomplishment. You could tell it was something he was very proud of. Come to find out, he had people with him that did everything for him. Set up tents, carried supplies, and so on. But the real kicker is a helicopter delivered meals from 5-star restaurants every night. The way rich people hike is not the same way as commoners hike. Story 34, the old money ones have this wild surface-level social etiquette and banter. It's insane the wittiness and ability to hold conversations without substance that comes from an upbringing of country, clubs, galas, fundraisers, etc. Half the time, it could be dialogue from a TV show. Story 35, when they go shopping, they're taken to a back room with hors d'oeuvres and champagne, and a personal shopper gets items for them. Basically, it's another store within the store that the public doesn't know about. Story 36, my mother-in-law has a massive dining table prominently shown in her dining room. With a beautiful indented copper surface, she absolutely refuses to let anyone so much as touch it, much less eat on it or place anything on it. It's a purely design piece. Story 37, to resume it all, their life is based about using and gaining money. So every day is a business day to them, even though they're not working, and this is mostly because they need to stay on the move. Story 38, they spend a lot of time managing their material possessions, and the knowledge that if there is a better version of something out there, they could have it keeps them awake at night. I very briefly dated a guy who invented a better way to powder dehydrated vegetables and sold it for $55 million. He flew me to his winter place in FL after we met on Tinder. He had a sailboat, a custom-modded Sprinter, a Tesla each for his winter and summer homes, all the kiteboarding gear, pool, etc. But my God, the amount of anxiety, tinkering, researching, and just general stuff management. Would the Flibberty gibbet on the sailboat be better in brass than chrome? The Tesla was taking too long to be delivered. Did he get the right mods on the Sprinter? Maybe he should have gotten a second bunk installed. Now he's got to find the best Sprinter bunk guy, and it turns out he's in Utah. The Thingy that stores the SUPs could be replaced by the slightly better Thingy. The boat is going to get stolen, so now we need an anti-boat theft. Whatever he was never done getting everything, just writing never would be, it was exhausting. Story 39, I became a business owner recently and had the chance to speak to a seasoned CFO at a local networking event. Another business owner was lamenting about how his digital marketing agency has been in the red for 3 years in a row. He had to do a round of downsizing and is now seeking advice from the seasoned CFO on whether he should sell his car, which is on paper owned by the company, to free up some cash flow. Below is a rough recount of the conversation, CFO. So you said you've laid off people. Assuming you can collect back all the bad debts floating out there, and you close 1 or 2 more clients before the turn of the year, wouldn't that put the business in the green? BO, that's a probability. Yes. CFO, then my advice would be sell the car when that happens. BOY, if the business is already in the green, ID have no need to free up extra cash flow. CFO, my child, if you were to sell your car now, law of depreciation would dictate that you'd make a loss of $50K to $60K on the selling price, assuming your business turns a $30K to $50K profit at the turn of the year. If you sell the car then, you'd be able to tell IRB that the business had made a loss and get a year of tax-less heaven. Literally, everybody jaws on the floor, literally the rich people game, guys. Story 40, not sure if the average person has no idea about this, but rich people invest in their kids' education and kids' activities. They won't question getting a private tutor to help their child, even a young child, and the kid may not even be struggling in school. Not to mention lots of after-school activities, sports, swimming, arts, music. Story 41, car ownership shenanigans. I help rich folks buy expensive cars, and this is what I see one. Buying extremely limited production run cars that have a delivery period 2 to 3 years out from date of booking, and then adding highly bespoke customization, making them one of one. This includes flying over to the factory for customization, including meeting the key team. Hood actually built spec said car. 2. The cars go where they go, having said car shipped all over for exotic drives, including with them on airplane cargo. Emirates allows for passengers to be in first class while their cars travel with them 3 decks below in cargo. For security that follows discreetly by motorbike or other cars to protect both the car and owner from carjackings. In city driving, these security bikes that create a discreet moat between the car and any errant drivers. If you're not actively looking, you'd be hard-pressed to see this given how seamlessly they operate. 5. Maintenance that is super bespoke and extraordinarily complicated, because preserving miles on these cars is everything. Maintenance techs fly out to where the car is. A Paganini owner would ship his car from Hong Kong to drive in the UK, then have it carried by cover transportation to London for painstakingly precise detailing, before shipping it back to Hong Kong. The owner only does the driving, and that too for a few days. The rest is all orchestrated seamlessly by his team. 6. They have a team to maintain and keep these cars in drivable condition simultaneously that involves keeping them on maintenance schedule, battery tender, tires rotated for flat spots, and driven to keep fluids moving. One at a garage had been instructed to have tire warmers set up to turn on at 3 a.m. for specified cars in the garage on Saturday morning, so the owner could have safe traction on the 1400 WHB monster from the get-go. Story 42. Stiff employees, tradespeople, and business associates. They're not afraid of the consequences of not paying non-institutional creditors. They know that going to court is a hassle for the little people who will accept lower payment to avoid it. At a high enough level, they also know that institutional creditors will take partial or delayed payment. They see human interaction as a game with few rules and are less burdened by norms of any sort. Story 43. One thing that's been interesting to me as my partner, and I have been increasingly financially fortunate, is that there are companies that disassemble and clean your grill. The expectation is to do it twice yearly. You generally pay around $1,200 per service, and there's a tech that comes to your house and works for 6 to 8 hours to get it all spotless. Admittedly, we went for it the first year we were in our house, and then we were like, WTF are we doing? So now we use what I call the cremation setting and turn everything inside to ash, then put in some elbow grease to get the ash scrubbed off. It's not as clean as the tech can do, but also takes us almost no time, and it's clean enough. Story 44. Private travel clubs that blend their clients into areas as normal people travel groups, all while having them surrounded with security and getting them the most exclusive access to everything. The tour bus they pull up on might be generic looking, but it has run flats and bulletproof glass along with armed security on board, as well as trailing. Story 45. I traveled first class back from Dubai to NYC after a bad health incident. The food is a la carte, and you order at any time. These mofos are showering on the plane. The bathroom was larger than my bathroom at home. They're on a separate floor guarded by security. The ticket cost $13,500 one way. The gift bags are like what you get at an awards dinner, just bonkers. Story 46. Private airport transfers. A luxury car picks you up whenever you're going to the airport, provided by the airline, takes you to a separate check-in and security checkpoint. Once you've done it a couple of times, you can't go back. Story 47. Not really having a job. They seem to do things that appear to be a job, but they can and will drop them whenever they want to do something else. I'm guessing that there's actually someone they're paying who truly does the job, and they just occasionally play it doing the job. Story 48. Use an entirely different house as a storage shed. I worked for a lady who started a background checking business with her husband in the 70s or 80s. When I met her, they owned 2 yachts. For homes, they stayed 5 all along the West Coast, and 2 homes that were just for storage. One day, she said we needed to grab some things for her summer party from one of the house. When I asked what's in one of the homes, she smiled and said, well, decorations, of course. She opens the front door of a 30,000 square foot home, and it is filled to the brim. It looks like Party City, Spirit Halloween, Michael's, a pottery shop, and a glass store all in one. Every holiday, every theme, every season, over 200 plus different costumes, statues, ornaments, banners, fireworks, furniture, games, any and everything you needed for any party you could find in that home. I was in awe. And do you know what she calls that home? Her she shed, because her husband never sets foot in it. Why, he has his own man cave, a 20,000 square foot home that sits on a man-made lake, and has, I'm not joking, 2 hand-built motorcycles in every room of the house. It was insane, but they were the nicest people I loved to work for, a bit eccentric, but good people. Story 49. I was baffled when my friend's uncle took us to dinner before dropping us off at the airport, and the waitress brought out water in glass cups, and he asked her to take them back and bring us out glass bottles of water. Story 50. My ex was rich. He bought a few buildings in Brooklyn's Sunset Park Chinatown decades ago that are now worth millions. He deals a lot in cash, as did many of his Chinese buyers. One thing he told me that blew my mind is people who deal in cash bring it to their real estate closings. Like they carry a briefcase full of 5M cash that is counted at the closing table. They will be accompanied to the closing by armed security. When my ex would have a closing, he'd have some of his buddies in the NYPD accompany him. I'm a commercial real estate paralegal who has closed a ton of multi-million-dollar deals and had never heard of this. Story 51. Tons of rich people are very active swingers. I'm not rich, I come from broke, and I'm doing okay. But I work for rich people, the face they put on for political reasons, which being rich is inherently political. Another thing the average person doesn't get is completely different from who they actually are. Story 52. I knew a guy right after high school that came from a wealthy family. Looking at him and talking to him, you'd never know he came from money, really trashy, dirty, and what we'd call a wannabe back in the day. He'd randomly show up to parties or hangouts selling drugs and stuff, and then would casually ask if anyone wanted to go to the small regional airport nearby and go fly in his dad's plane. I personally never went, but I had buddies who did, and they said they would get into this small plane, and there would be a pilot just waiting for him to tell them where to go, and they'd take off and do crazy maneuvers in the air like extreme angle dives. So they felt weightless, pretty dangerous stuff over the city, and ridiculous for a joyride. I can't imagine how much it cost for this and his dad. Story 53. They have private firefighters. I live in a small town where a lot of very rich people have vacation homes. It's a ski resort town. When a big forest fire was getting near town, their home insurance providers were sending private firefighting companies to protect their homes. The thinking is if their house burns down, a 20-30M claim, plus all of the insured art inside, exotic car in the garage, etc., that's a huge payout, plus they have a very unhappy, powerful customer. So the insurance company makes sure their houses will not burn down by sending private firefighters with equipment and trucks and everything. Story 54. They think of flying to Italy just to eat the pasta they crave in a restaurant like they're taking a trip to a convenience store at midnight because they're hungry. Story 55. Friend of my wife married into a very rich family. Her uncle wanted to buy a boat. No one made the boat he wanted, so he just bought a boatyard in China, apparently for less than it would have cost for the boat to be made in the West, to make his boat. Turns out people like the modern Clipper look, and now he has a side hustle selling 20 million Clipper-style yachts. Story 56. The father-in-law of a relative used to have a restaurant in the middle of nowhere, no menu, no price, one large table. Occasionally people would book ahead and fly in by helicopter, and he would cook what he wanted. It wasn't open every day, although I suspect there was some sort of discussion about what sort of food, but the details were up to him, and everyone had the same, like a family dining experience. He cooked for us once. It really was incredible. He was a pretty chill guy with an incredible past. He formerly held some very important and powerful positions. Story 57. The private no-application country club scene is wild. Got a glimpse through a friend. A couple was discussing the merits of which of their private jets to use for the wife's girls trip. Which one of the few they owned, like you were talking about buying a throw pillow. Story 58. When I dated a really, really rich man, one of the things that I found interesting was that we didn't need reservations anywhere. All of the most exclusive restaurants knew him and his family, and he'd decide he wanted to go, and he'd call and tell them we were on the way, and these fancy fully booked places would not only have a great table ready, but an owner would be out front waiting to welcome us as we stepped out of the car. Another thing that perhaps the average person wouldn't have an idea about. He would notice if things were expensive. This was back in the day when we had movies on video, and someone borrowed one from him and hadn't given it back, and I remember him saying, with annoyance, they are kind of expensive. Story 59. Write off virtually everything as a business expense, set up scholarship charities that only their own kids ever receive. But it makes college costs a charitable deduction. Donate absolute garbage to Goodwill or other charities. Then claim huge value on the receipts that Goodwill allows you to complete yourself. Story 60. My friend was the private nanny for a billionaire, one who is now one of the richest people on earth. She has so many stories about wild things that rich people do, and she started with them when they were only rich, not grossly rich, so she saw the decline happen in real time. By the time they were multi-billionaires, she was having to schedule family time each week, so they would even see their young children, and then when she had the audacity to try and quit because she wanted to go back to study, they came up with a number. For each year you keep working for us, we'll give you X bonus, etc. She said that was the moment she realized she had been bought, and they had no concept of not getting their way. They thought their money could get anything. She quit anyway. The moment she told them they had security, she was good friends with her to the gate, and they never spoke to her again. She had practically raised their kids for them, and she never saw them again. Story 61. Work in fine dining and watch your mental health deteriorate. The level of pretentiousness and sense of entitlement is unlike anything I have ever seen before. It honestly made me lose hope in humanity. If 95% of super rich people act like this, then probably most of us wouldn't be that much different ourselves if we ever had that kind of wealth. Money really changes people, and most of the time, it isn't for the better. Story 62. Concern about safety when not at secure property. Looks out a vehicle while parking with much more interest than I would if way out in public may wear mask or hat and have hands in pockets with mace, or have bodyguard very close by. Is the door locked? I just started getting Amazon and groceries delivered. They either have employees pick it up or have it delivered. Combination of I can't be with all those common people, or I don't feel safe out there. Story 63. I worked disaster response after Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas. A millionaire let us borrow his mansion on Paradise Island in Nassau, while his family stayed in their other mansion in Italy. Story 64. If you're in privilege or priority banking, taking a loan on your mortgage and paying it back monthly entitles you to credits which you can use to offset your flight tickets or fly on business for free. This option is not open to the average person. In essence, the rich do get richer. Story 65. I worked for a billionaire, and the tax loopholes are absurd. He timeshared a private jet, and when he used it, he'd invite people because he could claim it as a business expense if there were a certain amount of people on board. Story 66. So, just a note, all these people you're talking about is who we were giving up Medicare, clean energy, and the environment so they could do whatever craptastic decadent whim they think about. Story 67. I know the son of a hedge fund owner who takes a private jet for the day with his friends to play golf in other states, and then flies back in time for dinner. Story 68. They use their money to buy time. Hairdresser. Doctor visits their home, hire help for routine tasks to free up time for more important matters. Nothing is DIY. Story 69. Buy a cheap fixer-upper house as a starter house and live in it while their kids are one of 5 or so, and then buy a huge mansion later. I've had so many clients I didn't know were rich upgrade to a crazy expensive house in what feels like spur of the moment.